recording as well. So I'm going to give you a few tips about online marketing, especially during this time. Social media is at an all-time high right now. As you can imagine, more and more people are working from home. They have more time. They're on social media, and they're also on their email. They're also reading their email. So it's really important that you're portraying your business and your brand with sensitivity, and that you're staying relevant. So like I said, I'm gonna give you about 4 tips and then we'll go from there. So I wrote an article on LinkedIn. I'm taking these tips from LinkedIn, and I will give you a link in the Zoom group chat with the full article, and you can read it too. So the first tip is you want to make sure that you're aligning your message and tone. You want to keep positive, you want to be inspirational, you want to be helpful, and the things you want to avoid being are humorous. Even if your brand is witty and humorous and using puns, it's not the right time to do that. And even if this goes against your brand personality, that's okay. You may look at other big brands like Denny's or P.F. Chang's or McDonald's and notice how their online messaging and their tone has changed. From Valentine's Day, they might have wrote something witty. I know Denny's wrote something about being hot stuff or hot or grilling, and now they're taking a more sensitive approach, but they're also being warm and connecting with their audience. So you want to make sure you're aligning your messaging and tone. You want to avoid certain language. A couple months ago, you know, if you said you had a killer deal, people wouldn't think twice about it. But if you say you have a killer deal now, that may bring thoughts of, you know, things that are going on today. You want to avoid words like killer or contagious. You know, we want to say our fries are contagious. Now you would rethink saying that, or health-related terms, or spread. Instead, you want to take a neutral or supportive stance. You want to talk about teams, connecting, playing a role, coping, learn more. So instead of saying click here, exclamation mark, you might want to say learn more or buy today. So people aren't thinking about buying things right now. I generally like to use learn more. And my last tip is the set it and forget it tip. I talk to clients about scheduling their social media or scheduling their email blast. Well, right now, if you have things scheduled, it's really important that you check it. It's always important that you check scheduled content for relevancy, but more than ever, if you have scheduled content that's supposed to go out, you want to make sure that you're checking it for like the appropriateness. I know big companies before in the past had blunders where they let scheduled content go out at the wrong time. So this may include, you know, sending out birthday or anniversary offers. You might want to reword that email blast or that thing that's going out. Holidays that are coming up, you may want to look at your wording and your tone on those posts. And jokes and humorous campaigns, you may want to rethink those. So that's just a little blurb about some tips that can help you with your online marketing. Like I said, if you're not marketing online, you might want to consider just getting out there a little bit. More and more people are on there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm going to go ahead and put my URL in the chat, and you can read the full article about online marketing during COVID-19. So that was my little tip for you today, and I'll go ahead and give Alysia the wheel.
Thank you, Heather. We really appreciate you at the firm and your guidance, especially during this time, and helping us get ready to get all of this information out to the clients and in general to the community. It was essential having you lead this campaign. Many people think that accountants have this wheelhouse of knowledge. Well, we do, but we're not very good at communicating it. So our graphics design team is essential in how we help share information so that it can be easily understood. Heather, can you on your screen share the first, the EIDL flyer that we have designed? And we'll start with EIDL. If I just want to give a heads up to everyone on the call, and if you want to ask me a specific question, just get in to my chat box, and I will be reading that as we go over this. And then we will also have a Q&A right after every one of these SBA loan topics.
Just one second, sorry. I have all my kids' flyers up for homeschooling. Oops, that's not it. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so the first thing I want to mention is that the marketing used for EIDL, according to the SBA, became this information about a grant. Okay, so the first thing we noticed, clients were getting confused on what EIDL is. Now, it's a disaster recovery loan. What that means is that they were giving a forgiveness of $10,000 per company initially from the CARES Act. The CARES Act gave EIDL, which is an SBA program that's been around, and it's used during disaster like Hurricane Katrina, different times where there's major disasters in areas like in Nebraska and the Dakotas. When they had that really severe winter storm, a lot of people would have qualified for an EIDL loan. The EIDL loan is up to $2 million that you can borrow for your company. The term of the loan is 30 years and the interest rate on it is 3.75. So the grant part was supposed to be a max of $10,000, and then they would qualify you for your loan for the 30 years. And then you could decide what you wanted to take from that loan. Now, what happened is they gave out a forgiveness of $1,000 per employee that was submitted as a legitimate employee of the company. So most of my clients at this point, even including Heather, are getting $1,000 per employee, and then they're not getting the full $10,000. The full $10,000 is not being forgiven. This is just what we're noticing right now that's happening out there in the market, because we're going to call this a market. It's a banking loan. What they're going to be doing going forward with EIDL is, once it's refunded because Congress is voting, they're going to continue to give you $1,000 of a grant that's forgiven per employee, and then they will pre-qualify you for a dollar amount, and they will come back to you on the loan. It takes more than 3 weeks usually to go through the process for EIDL. Any questions? You can go ahead and put questions in the chat box, and then I will give you permissions to speak.
I had some questions.
Okay.
So I did receive my EIDL,
Yep.
$1,000 per employee. Now that I have to submit proof, right, that I used it for payroll or mortgage or rent?
Payroll. So the $10,000, you have to submit proof that you used it for payroll. So they'll be asking you for a report.
Okay. And you said that are they coming back? Because at first it was a $10,000 grant, and now I got $1,000 per employee.
Right, and that they're going to keep that limited to that. It's going to be $1,000 per employee. The legislation in Congress gave SBA permission to limit terms on the money that they were handing out, and I have a feeling they just had so much of a demand for the response on the money and the funding that they went in and they tried to pull back funds, and just, you know, they made this is technically would be considered a special ruling, because now they're looking at individuals and how many employees you actually have to get the forgiveness. Tammy, did you have any questions? If you want to unmute yourself and hop in for a second.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tammy.
I don't have any questions now. I'm just taking down some notes, but thank you. I want to really be able to know this better, so when I'm talking to other businesses with the chamber, I can try to guide them correctly.
Right. And so one thing we're noticing is that there's a confusion between the information. Both are loans. The terms of the loans are different for each one. So we're gonna make sure that we focus on explaining the loan terms. Shannon, Karen, or Mike, do you guys have any questions?
No.
Mike, did you have any questions?
No, I'm just listening. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so again, the EIDL loan is a standard loan that the SBA funds. All of these are loans from the government. The EIDL loan, if you read into the terms of it, is directly funded by the Treasury, Department of the Treasury. Technically, all the money is coming from the Treasury for either EIDL or the Paycheck Protection Plan. So that's pretty much where they're both loans is what I want you guys to take away.
Well, I have a question because I've heard it both ways where you could only get one or the other, or if you get the EIDL that you would have to pay it back if you got the PPP, you'd have to refinance it with the PPP.
Yeah, so we will answer that question,
okay.
But I want to answer it after we go through the PPP because the confusion is in what money and how much money is each one have and what are we trying to do with it. And the CARES Act, the legislation, if you actually look at it, the document is 880 pages long. One of the things that we're noticing as firms is, as usual, per usual, they're not facilitating the law. They're making their own rules, the SBA. So when we go in to talk about this next loan, the PPP, we're going to talk about kind of what's happened and how come groups like Shake Shack and Ruth Chris have gotten money. So Heather, will you go ahead and pull up the flyer from the PPP? Okay, so one of the things that I've talked to different clients about, because I have C corporations, S corporations, partnerships, small businesses, all kinds of different levels and nonprofits that I do accounting for with the firm. And some of these funds aren't easily qualified for certain types of businesses. The nonprofit businesses are not qualified for most of this money. So this just is something that you need to have a heads up on. If you're going to try to help a nonprofit try to qualify for any of this money, I would recommend just reaching out to me and I'll get on a quick, chat with you and walk you through some of the regulations. That way you can be prepared to help the nonprofits because they're limiting their access to this funding. The PPP is the Paycheck Protection Plan. It is set up for small businesses, and it was $349 billion that was supposed to go from the Treasury to the SBA. The SBA was going to facilitate the loan, and then the banks were going to verify it. And what that did for the government is it gave them 3 different levels of separation. They were able to then use the banks to do the vetting and to act as brokers, and then the SBA to facilitate the requirements of the loan. During the time before the application came out, when the legislation passed, the first application opening was April 3rd, and then the second one was April 10th. And what we noticed is from 3 days before the 3rd all the way to 2 days after the 10th legislation, the SBA kept changing their guidelines, which made it very complicated for people to try to get approved through their lending institutions. We also noticed that the big banks were struggling, and it seemed like they were reaching out to individual business owners and vetting who they felt they should give access to the funds first before just giving it out in general to the banking customers they had. We noticed that with Wells Fargo, they were limited in the amount of funds that they got allocated from the 349, And now not only did they have to pull out of funding for most of their small business owners, but then now they're being sued. So Bank of America is kind of struggling too. I know Heather's with Bank of America. We've been watching their process. Chase completely epically failed. We went through a couple of applications with 3 of our clients, and we noticed that they couldn't even get back to our clients in order to help them process documents. One of my major retail stores has 15 employees and $1.5 million in revenue. Should have had no problem. High bank deposits. Chase couldn't even facilitate their loan. Didn't even get back to them before the funding was out. We're just noticing big banks are struggling a lot, and it's unfortunate because everybody's suffering from that. And it just tells us, and it's going to come out more and more in the news, that they went to individual business owners. We have personal business bankers at these businesses at the bank for us as businesses, and you know, why didn't they reach out to other businesses besides maybe their, you know, who knows, special clients? I don't know, but it's coming out in the news, and we're seeing a lot of that going on. So what your Paycheck Protection Plan is supposed to do for you, now that we know all the trash that came out with it, is it's supposed to be a loan for up to $10 million that you have to qualify based on different criteria, depending on what type of business you are. If you were in the corporation categories, a C Corp or an S Corp with 500 or less employees, then you were going to be able to qualify for a loan of your payroll, and for an average or a monthly, because that depended on if you were seasonal or if you have a regular steady income in business. And once you calculated your average monthly payroll, you would multiply it times 2.5, and that would be your loan amount. Your loan amount would be then forgiven, and it's worth 8 weeks of your payroll. And you had to submit your 940, your 941. You had to submit just your list of employees. And if you were an S Corp or a C Corp, that was pretty much all they required besides your tax return. So the higher level businesses that have all these reports, it was pretty easy for them to get through the reporting. And then it kind of got a little bit more difficult and technical from there. You went to the next level, which is your partnerships. And they wanted your financials, they wanted your tax returns, and then they also wanted you as the owners, any of the draws that you had paid yourself, they wanted a report of the draws. And you needed to take the calculation from either 1099s that you'd received for the year for revenue and to divide those by 12 to get your average monthly payroll, or what you'd paid yourself in your draws. You would take the total of all the draws and divide them by 12, depending on what your partnership situation is. If it's 50-50, it's pretty easy. But if it's 20-80 or 40-60 or anything like that, that's us accountants on the other side had jumped in with the partnerships to try to help them figure out what their monthly average calculation would be. And then we were able to complete the reports for the partnerships. Then April 10th came around and they said, okay, guys, you can finally open up for sole proprietors and independent contractors. So the poor sole proprietors have been asked for the most information, and it's probably been the most stressful to them because they're being asked for all of their financials all the way through current. So you had to split 2 reports. You had to do a 2019 financial for the year. You had to do a 2020 financial into the March 1st. And then you had to do your draws. You had to do your 1099s. We had to sit there and calculate the monthly average with everyone, and then figure out, all this paperwork had to go to the SBA. Independent contractors was pretty straightforward. We took all of their 1099s they'd received for the year and added them up. They still wanted the financials and the tax returns with independent contractors, but we could get away with just doing 1099s that they had received for the year and then dividing those by 12 and multiplying them by 2.5. Now that's the normal categories that you had for PPP. There are groups that had both payroll because they have employees, and then themselves. That's a lot of my sole proprietors. The situation with them, if they weren't an S Corp, was they had both employees, and we did all of their 941s and their 940s, and their W-2s for all their employees. And then they, weren't for themselves. They can't put themselves on payroll. So we had to go through it and do all of their owner draw reports. So those were all the pre-documents that SBA had required in order for you to qualify for your Paycheck Protection Plan. Now, what I wanted to be able to get to in this class is to talk to you guys about what it was that you're going to have to report back now that we're going into, some people have been approved, gotten their money from the PPP, and what's going to happen over the next 8 weeks, and what are they going to be starting to do in June when they're requiring you to provide the support, and what does this 25% look like for you guys that's allowed to go to rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. I think for me, that's what I had Betsy announce because I wanted everyone to be prepared for the documents that you're going to need in order to provide the support, in order to get the money forgiven so that it doesn't turn into a loan. The loan is a 2-year term. You don't have to pay the loan for the first 6 months. It is a 1% rate. But I know that the amounts borrowed could end up becoming significant and difficult to pay back over 2 years. So I just want to make sure that we're all diligent together to get most of the money forgiven so that it doesn't turn into a loan that has to, be a burden on businesses going forward. So you guys are going to still need to provide, they're going into a second quarter, so the payroll report will still be the same. You're going to provide a 941. You're going to provide paycheck rolls and registers from your employees. You're going to need to be very specific on how you strategize, if you're individual owners, on how you take your draws. You want to be able to count those all towards payroll so that it helps you get things forgiven. The 25%, what we're speculating right now, is going to be on the amount spent, not on the amount borrowed. Which what that means is if you don't spend all of the loan money that was calculated for you for the 8 weeks, then it's going to reduce the amount of money that you're allowed to use for your 25% for what I call overhead, which is rent, mortgage, interest, and utilities. So you want to be very careful about how you do that. You can reach out to me and I can help you look into what you might need to do in order to strategize that differently. But I'm just giving out, a heavy recommendation to all of my clients to be very diligent on how we're gathering the information. Obviously, if you didn't do your 2019 taxes, but you got it done by June, they may ask for that. Any general paperwork, they're going to be asking for payments for your payroll taxes, a proof of them, and then all of your bills that you would submit for that 25%. Does anybody have any questions? Shannon, do you have any questions? I can't hear you.
No, I'm good.
Karen, did you have any questions?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm listening very carefully. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, Alysia, if we use it all for payroll,
Yeah,
then we're good, right?
Yeah, it's forgiven. It's 100% free money then.
But then we don't need to calculate this 25% for rent and utilities because, I work from home, so I already can only write off a portion of that. So it seems a little muddy for me. I would just use it all for payroll.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really excellent point of what a strategy would look like. How there's just like, what, I don't mind going ahead and I can cover my, utilities because I am working from home normally. And so that she has a 20% allowance that we do for her as a client. And, so it's not really worth it for her to take that free money and put it over there if she can just do it all for her payroll.
I also, sorry, but to dominate the questions, I even designed the flyers, and it's still, it's still confusing to me.
Yes.
So the money is dried up. That's like the latest news. When do you think they'll have the second rollout of money? And do you think the big banks are learning their lesson to take on the smaller guys instead of, the bigger guys? I've heard it all and read it all too, that they took on the bigger guys for the fees. Do you think, when do you predict the second rollout? And do you think us smaller people, me, we have 2 people on payroll, that's it,
Right.
will be receiving those funds?
So that's an excellent question, Heather, and I really appreciate you being on this call. The banks have made $9 billion off of the fees so far for processing the $349 billion to the businesses. And Congress is now in legislation. Heather and I have sent out another newsletter to clients, and we would gladly send it to you guys if you want to give us your emails. Stating that the news is they're voting on it this week for the second round, and that if it gets voted and passed by Friday, most likely funding will start again on Tuesday. So I'm trying to get all of the clients that are still in the queue over to their banks so that when Tuesday comes, they're the first ones that the SBA opens the door to, and then they're in that funding round.
So at first I was like really worried because of credit. I'm a business owner, my credit's not that great, but I heard they're not even looking at personal credit. That's not coming into, it's just looking at the required documents.
Yeah, so they're looking at your revenue. Okay, so if you have strong deposits, and they're looking at your documents only, they are not pulling your credit. Now with EIDL, they did hit your credit. They have other requirements. It's more of a traditional loan in some ways. They're not saying no to funding, but if they hit your credit and your credit's a little bit lower, they are reducing the amount that they're going to authorize you to borrow for EIDL. So Heather, why don't we go ahead and move on to another topic because you and I have a whole series that we're going to be, we're doing a weekly newsletter for the next 2 months to clients just to give them valuable information. So the one that went out this week is the Coronavirus Relief Act, the very first one that Congress passed through. And Heather, let's go ahead and go through the paycheck cuts. So initially, the Internal Revenue Service, after Congress had released the Coronavirus Relief Act, had stated that they were willing to forgive the first quarter payroll taxes due for Social Security and Medicare and withholding. What we've learned since then is they've come back and said, well, no, we're not going to forgive the money because the Congress just passed this giant stimulus in the CARES Act. You guys, you need to use your money from the payroll to go catch up your back taxes that you owe on your employees. So the payroll tax cuts turned into a credit, okay? And what that means is you can defer the taxes due on your 941 for the first and second quarter to a later period. They haven't told us how long they're going to go in the deferral, but what that did was allow employers to get the paycheck protection money and then be able to fund their payroll tax liability with that. Now, honestly, and we're very clear on this, the firm, if you didn't get paycheck protection funds, then you're still stuck with your payroll liability, even if it is deferred and just delayed. And what we've recommended is just go ahead and make small payments, especially if you use EFTPS, towards your liability, even if it's deferred. Don't wait till the last minute to go ahead and pay your payroll taxes. But what we were hoping that it was going to do is it was going to free up more cash for both the employer and the employees, and then help keep the economy moving forward. As we, struggle through trying to figure out what COVID-19's impact is to us as a country, and in general overall to the GDP, the gross domestic product. So we have this flyer that we're sending out and a little bit of information in our newsletter. And if you'd like to get on our mailing list, we would be glad to send you out the first 2 newsletters that we did.
So, Alysia, so that was one of my concerns that I was thinking about when, I'm going to say when I do get the PPP, not if, that okay, I can make payroll, but can I make my payroll tax? So are you saying this will cut my payroll tax will go down, or I can just defer it, or both?
It's going to be a deferral. What we're hoping that they're going to realize at the end of the tax year is that they're going to give you guys a credit back that allows you to reduce the overall payroll tax. They went back and forth, Congress did, about what they wanted to do. And so at this point, Treasury, the Internal Revenue Service has just called it a deferral. You can delay paying your taxes.
Did they say how long?
So it's definitely first and second quarter. It's all going to depend on what the president does with that STAY Act. He's laid out his recovery plan for when the phases are of allowing businesses to reopen, and when he's going to open up the borders for travel. Phase 2 includes non-essential travel. So we have to get through phase 2 of the president's plan for the COVID, what they're calling new normal, before we're even going to be able to get a direct answer from Treasury about what the delay or the deferment is how long it's going to be. I know that Treasury has shut down most of their main lines. They only have 25% of their operations up right now, and sent all their employees home. So the 25% was working on that stimulus check rollout, and they're trying to continue processing the tax returns for the season. Now, are there any other small business owners on the call? I know that Tammy, your husband's corporate. Karen, you're with the chamber, so you guys are getting blasts all the time from SBA and everything.
True. We have been watching many a webinar also.
Yes, you guys are highly informed. We're very lucky to have such a knowledgeable chamber.
We hope so, and thank you for your knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite things.
As well as Heather. Thank you.
I know that many of you don't know, but I used to be government. So I'm a former IRS auditor, and I am a Department of Defense analyst. I spent about 7 years with the government. So this is one of my specialized areas. Mike, is there anything, what kind of business do you run?
It's a nonprofit, so it's a C4. So I'm just looking to see if the EIDL would help us out, but we only have the 1 employee, so it's probably not worth the effort.
Okay, well, why don't you reach out to me afterwards, and we can talk. I just walked one of my other nonprofits through this. So, and Heather works with a lot of nonprofits. Some of them actually have applied for the PPP and successfully they're in the queue. So there's options for you guys.
Okay, but what I looked at is the C4 designation is specifically excluded from the PPP.
Right. So that's, yeah. So that was one of the limiters. She wasn't exclusively a C4. So I was able to work her through, but she didn't have enough program. So she was facilitating a program that helped for recovery of sex trafficking. And so she needed more applicants in the program before we could apply for her for PPP.
That's fair. I understand there's nuances to it all. I was hoping to take advantage of the other checkbox on the application But as I read more through it and got more information, again, like everybody else on these webinars and all, you all were very helpful. But the C4 it's a property association. It's the MPOA, so we wouldn't be able to take advantage of it as a C4.
Right, right. Unless, because you might still be able to get in with the EIDL. The designation for that $10,000 grant is for the employee part, and that's only $10,000. The rest of it is just a regular disaster loan. So just let's go ahead still offline and try to see if we can't work through EIDL and get you guys some other ideas, because the loan is up to $2 million over 30 years. So if there is a possibility, we can look at like how you might want to present that.
Sure, always want to listen to new ideas.
Good, and I should have you talk on my TEDx stage. I run TEDx Mountain Hills.
That's cool. You probably know Kim.
I do. Is there any other questions? I left quite a bit of time. I wasn't sure because if there were 15 chamber members on here, then I knew that we would need more time in order to answer questions. So we left quite a bit of time in the webinar for question and answer, and for people to be late if they came in late. But Heather was kind enough to facilitate this so that it would be recorded and be available for members going forward.
I have a question, Alyssa.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to clarify. So I have to decide if PPP or the EIDL would be best suited for me. And you said the EIDL is a 2-year loan at 1% interest rate?
That's the PPP.
That's the PPP.
Mm-hmm. So the
Okay.
EIDL is 30 years and it's 3.75, and it doesn't have to be just for payroll. Because it's a loan, it's not the only part that's the forgivable part is that up to $10,000, but they're limiting it to how many employees you have in the company. So that's why they only issued like $1,000 or $2,000 if you had 1 or 2 employees. So they have said that they will roll the EIDL into the PPP. So there's going to be some kind of a combination that happens for people who do both. But I would think it would make more sense, because the other one's a 30-year term, for them to roll the PPP into EIDL, because it's the one that's the longer term. But they want to see if you can get it paid off, because they're assuming that these are going to be smaller amounts. They're qualifying you based on your revenues, so that you can qualify to repay them. So they're considering that these will be smaller amounts, and then I would assume that after 2 years, if your PPP wasn't paid off, they would roll it into EIDL. Okay. And then it would become a 30-year loan at 3.75%. And trust me, if that doesn't happen, not only is my firm, but every one of my clients and the business owners, we're going to be writing a letter to our congressman.
Okay. Well, I mean, if it's used for, if it's used for payroll, then it's forgivable. Yep. So that first amount. So, okay, that helps clarify.
Yeah, so you can apply for both. No problem.
Okay. So I'm automatically have applied by applying for this grant for the EIDL.
Yes.
They did pull my credit. They did do a credit check on Friday.
So how many employees do you have?
Just me.
So you're going to get $1,000 in the next couple of days deposited into your bank account.
Yeah. So I got it today. So so that process is done, and then my PPP PayPal is processing that application. So
yeah, and then you're going to get an offer from EIDL based on your credit over the next 10 days. They'll offer you a suggestion on a loan amount that for the EIDL. So one of the things that I've told clients to do is, if this is really a payroll situation and you want to make payroll, then borrow the amount that you were going to borrow for the PPP if they give it to you in the EIDL. No matter what, just make sure that you're hedging for 3 to 6 months of your business expenses in some way. Give yourself something extra that's sitting over there in your bank account.
Yeah. So so 3 to 6 months, because I've taken I'm a coach, and my corporate client, I've already taken, just for me, because this is huge, because it's just me, a $3,000 a month loss
Right.
with just losing one corporate client. I've lost private clients, so that helps me figure out what to.
Yeah, we're saying 3 months at the skinny, but 6 months would be reasonable, especially for people who are in the events market, because you guys can't get out to do your jobs, and it's just not. I mean, there's people are trying to go to online and webinars, but the amount of marketing that it takes to drive the demand isn't there. That's costly too. So some of this stuff is cost prohibitive to you guys. Even when you do have a marketing presence, to change the platforms over, people are trying to change the conference platforms over. And it is in a lot of ways being successful. However, it's just not profitable at this point.
Okay. That
Yeah,
clarifies.
we want to get you guys back out to your Hiltons and your grand ballrooms, getting your stuff done, to your big arenas. I mean, that even with COVID and the hesitations that we all have to put in to place in order to make sure that we don't reinfect everything, or ourselves and others, we still have a general presence of how things are done and how we do information. Yes, it is changing, but we also have to look at where is it that it's feasible and not cost prohibitive.
Okay. Thank you. That helps me.
Yeah, absolutely. Heather, what are some other things that you've seen with some of the nonprofits that you're working with as they try to work through this process?
Well, not particularly nonprofits, but some, I would say, 95% of my business is nonprofits, but there are other business owners that I chat with. They've been waiting on the PPP, and they're really angry that they ran out of money. And I even seen business owners that have, 3 employees that got all their ducks in a row, and then they heard that they ran out of money from credit unions, and they haven't heard back, or it's like crickets. So that's been what I've been hearing on the from my friends and clients.
Yeah, and it is. It's been very frustrating, and I'm just encouraging everybody, as a firm owner, that just stay steady. We will get you guys in, and we're pushing you back and pushing all of our owners into, let's get this done. They've given us pretty much a couple of weeks overall to complete this process. So let's, navigate this process as quickly as possible, get you in the queues so that you do have access to the funds. And I will have the clients who are qualified, they will be finished and all of their documents available to SBA by next Tuesday. So it's been quite a process to, even just get a handful of people through. Well, if anybody has any other questions, now would be the time to ask. Again, I'm Alysia Dahir, and I'm a chamber member, and I run Dahir Tax and Accounting. I have offices here in Fountain Hills and Scottsdale. And right now we're not seeing clients at the offices, but you can get me on teleconferences and through Zoom. Again, I have other partners like Heather that I work with so that we can get you guys out valuable information. You're welcome to get on our newsletter at any point. We will send that out to you. I will make sure that I talk with Betsy or Karen or even Tammy about being able to get your guys' emails and get you on our newsletters. They will be going out over, again, the next 2 months. We've sent out 2 of them so far, and we've got a total of 10 that will be going out. So if there's not any other questions, Heather and I are done. I've got a chat here real quick. Okay, yes, Tammy, thank you for your email. I find this platform very interesting because this is how I used to take my master's classes a couple years back when I finished my master's in finance. So I used to be the one that would ask the professor all of the questions. So now I'm quite excited to be on the other side of this conversation because this is a tool that has been available for many years. I got my master's in 2013. And now all of the world is considering it as a useful tool for business. So Heather, if you want to say some closing words, I would love for you as cultural sponge to close this out.
So like I said, I started today's webinar with some tips on your online marketing, and that goes into these uncertain times. So I did paste into the group chat how you can follow me on LinkedIn and read the entire article. And also, Alysia is a valuable asset to my business. If you have any questions, I'm sure she'd be happy to help them. She's helping me navigate. I'm the art brain, and marketing brain, but when it comes to accounting, we joke because I tell her sometimes I just hear blah, blah, blah. And whenever I'm talking to her, she says, that's what I hear when it comes to marketing. So thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, I'm recording this Zoom, so I can give you a copy of the Zoom. And then also in the event, we'll paste my LinkedIn, and then we'll paste Alysia's newsletter where you can download the flyers.
Thank you both on
Yeah,
behalf of myself and the chamber.
Of course. Thank you, Karen, for always being such a great support for all of us businesses.
Thank you.
And Tammy, welcome to the party.
We're here to help, as you are.
I'm looking forward to being able to go back to breakfast soon.
I think we're all with you and all of our other great events. That will come to be, believe me. Thank you again.
Thank you, Karen.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank
Tammy.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Stay healthy.